Welcome to the next episode of Mykaela's Corner. Happy Sunday, you guys. Hope you're doing well. I hope you guys are staying safe and staying healthy. And as we get into the school year, I hope you guys are staying sane. I know school can get a little crazy with homework and all the extra stuff that you have to do. But you guys, remember, you've got this. So stick with it, you guys. Stay strong. It's still getting into the routine, getting into a new rhythm, but I know you guys are going to do great. And hopefully you're already having so much fun at school. This week we are going to be talking about the bread of life. Who likes bread? I like bread. I love sourdough bread. You guys had sourdough bread before? It's really good. It's usually like white, or it has like cracked wheat in it, but it's usually like a big round loaf, and then you slice it up and you put butter on it. Oh, you toast it. Guys, if you haven't tried sourdough bread, you have to try it. It's delicious. Well, okay, I'm getting off topic here. We're talking about the bread of life, but not bread like sourdough bread. We are talking about what the bread of life is according to the Bible. Jesus is the bread of life. And it's a little tricky because that's a confusing thing to say. What do you mean he's the bread of life? Does that mean like he's actual like bread and we eat him and we slice him up? A little bit of Jesus on the side of our ravioli? No, that's not what it means. And we'll talk about that when we get to our lesson today, which, by the way, is another cartoon. I found another cartoon, and I'm going to finish off the rest of this month with our Bible time being cartoon series. Next week we have another one, and then starting in October, we're going to start a new series, or for the month, on our Bible lessons, and it's going to be called, wait for it, Heroes of the Faith. That's right, Heroes of the Faith. That means like big characters in the Bible, heroes that we look up to when we read Bible stories. We're like, wow, could that have happened? Guys, we're going to be talking about those leading up to the week of Halloween. Whether you celebrate it or not, don't worry, we're not going to be talking about spooky things, but we are going to be talking about the greatest hero of all, Jesus. And we're going to be doing it with a special, let's see, not Halloween, but it's more of like seasonal cool object lesson that we'll do with it. But you're just going to have to wait to see. I'm not going to give it away, but I promise it'll be really fun. So, today, for our craft today, we are going to not be making bread, because we've already done that, but we are going to be making a really cool craft, but it's going to require ingredients that go into bread, and then we're going to paint with it. What? Painting with bread ingredients? That's right. So stick around and let's jump into our day. Welcome to Bible Time. Guys, today we're going to be talking about a story from the Bible, from the book of John, where Jesus is talking to a crowd of people again. This particular story happens right after he feeds them the bread and fish from the 5 loaves of bread and the 2 fish from the story. That was not necessarily because they believed that Jesus was the Son of God and that they believed who he was, but because they were amazed by what he was doing. And so these same people were coming up to Jesus asking for more miracles. And I mean, that's kind of how most people start going to churches. They're curious and they're amazed by things that they see and they want to know more. So these people wanted to know more. So let's jump into our cartoon today to learn about our story and what Jesus has to say about being the bread of life.
The crowds earnestly looked for Jesus and finally found him on the other side of the Sea of Capernaum. Just the day before, Jesus had miraculously fed all of them with only a couple loaves of bread and some fish, and while it had satisfied them at the time, they returned to him hungry. But this is why they sought Jesus so desperately, not for who he was, but because he had amazed them at what he had done. The miracle reminded them of the days of Moses, when the nation of Israel was nourished daily with bread from heaven. Perhaps Jesus, like Moses, could usher in a new age for their people. Jesus spoke to the crowd. "You worked so hard to find me, but only so you could ask me for bread that satisfies a short while. Why aren't you looking for the bread that will satisfy you forever?" Bread that satisfies forever? Many in the crowd began to wonder how they could get this miraculous bread from God. They asked Jesus, "What works of God must we do in order to get this bread?" Jesus replied, "I am sent from God. Believe in me." But the crowd searched for a sign and questioned Jesus. Yes, you multiplied bread and fed thousands, but Moses brought down bread from heaven and fed millions. What great work will you do that will demonstrate that you are greater than Moses?" Jesus said, "You must hear me and understand this. Moses did not give you the manna. My Father gave it to you. And now he has sent to you the bread of life that I speak of." The expressions on the faces that looked back at him were mixed, some skeptical, some hopeful, and others simply eager to hear as they said, "Please give us this bread always." The crowd waited intently for his answer. Then Jesus announced, "I am that bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me will never thirst again." He spoke of his body as bread and his blood as wine. The suggestion of sacrifice disturbed and confused numbers of people who would not receive his words. In fact, many who had been following Jesus walked away from him on that very day. Jesus turned to the apostles and asked, "Will you leave me as well?" Peter spoke up for the others. "Lord, where else would we go? You alone have the words of eternal life."
Welcome back. Like we mentioned earlier, we're talking about how when I think of bread, I think of like yummy sourdough bread. But then when Jesus says he's the bread of life, that can be a little confusing. But he didn't mean literal bread. Like the story said, the people were asking him to do these miracles and saying, "Bring bread down from heaven like Moses did," or like God did for Moses back in the day. But the people were so concerned about like the miracles that they were missing the bigger picture, because Jesus was telling them, "I am the bread of life," that he was the bread of life. And they were confused by that, being like, "What do you mean? Like, show us these miracles." And Jesus was like, "I am that miracle." And they just weren't getting that picture there. They weren't understanding that Jesus didn't mean he was the literal bread, or that he would provide bread for them forever. He was saying that he could be that thing that sustains you and keeps you going forever if we just believe in him. That when we have Jesus in our hearts, he's going to be with us forever, and he's going to guide us and lead us. And eventually, when we get older or whenever we die, when we go to heaven, we'll be with him forever and ever and ever and ever, and it'll sustain forever and ever and ever. So basically what he was saying was that he was the answer to everything, and he is. Jesus is the answer to everything. And we know that when we have him in our lives, that eventually we'll live forever in heaven. Now, we won't live forever here on earth, and not everything will be perfect here on earth, but he's talking more like in the future, when we die, when we go to heaven, we'll be with him forever. Guys, that's pretty amazing. Another way to think about it is how, have you ever heard your moms and dads, or just adults in general, when they're looking at like a little baby and they're like, "Oh, they're so cute, I could just eat them." Or they're like kissing the little feet and they're like, "I could just eat your toes." Now, you know when your parents or whoever it is saying those things, they don't mean that they're literally going to eat the baby's toes, because yikes. But what they mean is that it's just so cute and they just want to be around the baby all the time, and that they just love it so much. That's kind of how Jesus wants us to think about him. He wants us to love him so much that we want to have him all the time. Back in the day, bread meant life. That's what they lived off of. They had to have bread to survive. And so Jesus was saying, "I am the bread of life. I am here to sustain, and I want you to consume all of me." Now, he did not mean to actually eat him. He meant that he wanted him to be the center of their lives, that everything focused around them. The people were so caught up in focusing on the miracles and the amazing things that Jesus was doing, and they wanted to see more, that they were missing that he was the miracle. So when we say that Jesus is the bread of life, that can be a little confusing, but what it means is, one, that means that he's going to provide eternal life for us. If we believe in Jesus, that means that we'll be able to spend eternity in heaven with him. He gives us everlasting life. It will never run out, and no matter what we do, it will always be there, just like his love for us. And number two is that he wants us to consume him, not like eat him, but more like have him be the center of our lives, because when he's the center of our lives, then we're doing the right things, we're going down the right path, and that's ultimately where he wants us to be. And so with that, guys, we're gonna move into a craft time that has to do with ingredients in bread. So get ready, because you're gonna need to grab some ingredients from your kitchen that we're gonna use for our craft today. So let's get to it. Welcome to Craft Time. Today we are talking about how Jesus is the bread of life, and how when he is in the center of our lives and when everything about our lives is centered around Jesus, that's when life can be the best. And that doesn't mean that it's always going to be perfect like we learned in our lesson, but it does mean that we're following Jesus, and so we know that in the end we're heading towards the best thing that can be. So for our project today, I thought, well, we made bread a couple weeks ago, so we can't do bread again. But I came across this cool project a while ago, and I thought you guys would love it. It's using ingredients that you put in bread, but then you turn it into paint. And then you make this cool project that in the end, we're gonna microwave it, and it'll become 3D art. Now, whoa, that sounds like a lot, but I promise, it's not that hard. You just need to have some of these ingredients, and I guarantee most of you at home have these ingredients. So here's what you need. First off, what we're gonna be painting on, and because we're gonna be microwaving it, you need a thicker piece of paper. So I'm gonna actually use a cardboard box, and I'm just gonna cut off like one of these flaps here, and then use that as my paper. Now for our ingredients for our paint. I have a recipe here for 2 ways to do it. So it depends on what kind of flour you have at home. If you have self-rising flour, I didn't have that, but if you have self-rising flour, you only need the flour and salt. But if you are like me and you just have regular all-purpose flour, you're gonna need flour, salt, but also baking soda. And then for everybody, you'll need food coloring, because that's gonna create the color for our paint, and water for mixing. And then you'll also want some paintbrushes. So depending on how many colors you make, you're gonna want that many paintbrushes and then some stuff to stir with. So let's get into it. Let's create, before I get messy, let's create my piece that I'm gonna use to paint on top of. So I'm gonna scooch this to the side. Take this with my scissors, and I'm gonna cut off this flap. Here I go. Ta-da! All right, so now that I'm seeing this though, we got a lot of tape on here, so I'm just gonna peel it off the edge. Oh, that came off easy. Oh, it only came off halfway, but that's okay. I just don't want it to go over the edge. I don't think it'll be a problem in the microwave or like be bad for the microwave, but I just want my project to look a little nice and not have tape hanging off the side. So voila, now I've got a nice piece of cardboard. So this is what we're gonna paint on in a little bit, but now that we've got it ready, we can set it to the side and this box. Boop. Okay, back to our ingredients. So if you have self-rise flour, you don't need to do this first step. You can wait until we get to the next step. So if you have all-purpose flour, clue in, this is where I need you. You're gonna take, these are gonna be our bowls for our paint, but first we gotta make our like flour kind of mixture first. So how we're gonna do that is, I have 1 cup of flour in this bowl. Oh no, I have a half a cup of flour. I remember, I made this project before and I had so much of the ingredients left over that I was like, I need to half it. So I have half a cup in here. And then I have, what do I got here? I got 3/4 teaspoon of baking soda. I'm gonna dump it right into my flour. Bloop. And, oh, some extra stuck in there. Okay. And then we're gonna add our salt, and this is 1/8 of a teaspoon. So I actually don't have an 1/8 teaspoon measurer. Does anybody? I don't know. But what you can do is just fill up your 1/4 teaspoon halfway, and then you just dump that in. I also don't think it matters between kosher salt and like fine salt, or like the really small bit. So whatever you have at home should be fine. So now that we have this, we're just gonna take a fork and stir it together just to make sure it's all incorporated and mixed up. Okay, now what we're gonna do is divvy this up into our 3 bowls. So these are gonna make our 3 colors. Now if you have self-rising flour at home, you can skip this step of mixing together your dry ingredients and go straight to adding them to your bowl. For each bowl that you choose to make paint in, you're gonna do 1 tablespoon of self-rising flour, 1 tablespoon of salt, and then we're gonna add in the water. So for each one you do, 1 and 1 tablespoon of each. So I'm gonna divvy this up here and scooch some into this bowl. Now it might get a little messy, and that's okay. Messy is fun. At least for me, I like getting messy. It means you're working hard. And this bowl. That's pretty even. Alright, so I can set my mixing bowls from all my ingredients to the side, because now we just need our paint bowls to the side. Alright, so now I've got my bowls mixed with filled with my flour mixture. And what we're gonna do is, if you have self-rise at home, add yours into your bowls, and then when we're at this place, next what we're gonna do is we're gonna add water until it becomes a paste. So not watery, not really watery, but also not very thick. You want it to be kind of the consistency of like a yogurt. Now it'll be a little chunky, and that's okay too. Like, it doesn't need to be perfect, but you just wanted to get it to kind of that level where it's kind of like a thick yogurt. And then we'll be ready for our next step. So I'm gonna add my water in, and then we'll go from there. Okay, I've got mine now to the consistency that I want it to be. So if you look here, it's kind of like goopy, but still like thick, but still like watery. It's kind of like yogurt, but also like oatmeal, because it's kind of a little chunky. So that's where you want it to be. And now we're gonna add in our food coloring. So I was looking at my coloring choices and the bowls that I had picked out, and guys, I have the perfect colors. I have a green bowl, so I'm gonna do green. I have this teal color, so I'm gonna do teal. And then I have blue. So now I'm gonna add in my food coloring, and we'll be ready to go. No, you don't need that much. You just need a couple drops to get it to whatever. Like, the more food coloring you put in, the brighter and bolder the color will be. And the less you put in, the lighter it will be. So depending on how you want it to be, I think I want it like a medium bold, but still like not crazy, but then also not like faint. I want it to be like right in the middle. So depending on what your preference is, you can add as much or as little as you want. So I'm gonna start with the green because blue is part of green, and work my way up to, oh yes, see this here? I've got my green. Okay, so it's not like crazy bold, and it's not crazy light. It's like a nice, pretty in between. See that? Aww. Okay, now moving on to my teal color, and a little bit of green's okay mixed in there. Ooh. And now this one is a little more watery, but it's got kind of almost perfectly matches the bowl color. And then our dark blue, which is close to the other color, but not quite. It's more of a true blue, where the other one has green in it. And with that, we're ready to paint. So I'm gonna scooch these like this so you can still see them. And now for each color, depending on how many you have at home, I picked one for each, but you're gonna have a paintbrush. Sorry, was that loud? You're gonna need paintbrushes. Ready. Okay, so grab your paper, and then let's see, can you see that all right? I'm gonna bring you in a little bit closer so you can see how I paint with this. All right, so now I've got my my cardboard, and I'm ready to paint. So I've got paintbrushes, my mixtures here. I've got my green here, chunky, but still smooth. And then my two blues, boop, boop. And so I figured this is up to you guys to decorate this however you want. But since we're talking about that Jesus is the bread of life, I thought we should make a cross. So I'm gonna paint on a cross here. And you just drag it on, and you don't want it to be very thin. You want it to be a little bit like thick so that you get the full color in there. So sometimes I like dab it in, or maybe I'll make an outline first and then I'll dab in the rest. So I'm gonna kind of create this outline of my cross. And now you can tell it's kind of getting thinned out my paint, so now I gotta add more in. And then I like to kind of fill it up so that it's kind of thick. I want it to be thicker. So I'm gonna take it and kind of just dab it on and spread it around with my paintbrush. Now if you're like me and you really like sensory things, this feels really cool. It's kind of like goopy feeling with the paintbrush, but it's kind of cool. It's not like any other paint you ever use. So I'm gonna kind of keep filling in my cross here till I get to the bottom, and then we can add in some of our other colors. And there you have it, guys. Now for the fun part, we're gonna take this to the microwave. Let's go. So now that we've got our craft finished, we are going to take our beautiful painting that you guys have made and we're gonna put it in the microwave and cook it for about, we'll do 10 seconds at a time until it's soft, and you'll see it kind of will puff up a little bit. So you don't want to overcook it because you don't want it to burn. That'll be stinky, but do 10 seconds at a time, and if it's not quite cooked, just do another 10 seconds, but keep an eye on it. So watch it while it cooks, so that way you don't overcook it. It might steam a little, but that's okay. You ready? Let's give it a try. Into the microwave we go. Oh, and there it is. Can you see that it's like bumpy? And when I touch it, ooh, it's warm, so be careful, but it's very soft. Oh, I guess there's a little bit of parts that are still a little undercooked, but I'm gonna leave it because I bet it'll dry out. I don't want it to cook the rest anymore. So that's how you make your own like little bread craft and paint with it. Voila! I can't wait to hear about how you guys did. If you're from Lakeside, make sure to share on that new page we created. I'd love to see your guys' craft. All right, well with that, let's close our time up. Guys, thank you so much for joining me today. It was so great having you. I hope you learned a lot, and I hope you know that you are loved, that you are missed. For those of you at Lakeside, I miss seeing you guys every Sunday. I hope you're doing well. Say hi to your family for me. And if your parents are on Facebook, have them post some pictures of you doing the crafts if you do it. I'd love to see. And for those of you who are not from our church, but are joining us from elsewhere, guys, it was so great having you too. I'm so happy that you joined us, and I hope you had fun and learned something new and enjoyed doing the craft. But with that, guys, it's the end of our time together, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. And with that, I'll see you next Sunday. Bye!